Let's see, tweet number 1. Communists be like, which, by the way, just as a comedy device, let's sit and appreciate the artistry of this. Communists be like, the fact that other people won't give me stuff they labored to produce proves I'm oppressed. Tweet number 2. Then when called out, they retreat to, no, we're just talking about rich people. Now force that doctor to help me. Then give me free food someone else grew. Last tweet. Then when called out, they retreat to fantasy arguments. Quote, real quote, definitely somebody said this, scarcity is fake, unquote. All right, there's a lot going on here, but RM, you are our resident Tim Pool expert. You want to start us off?
I mean, this seems like a person that exists in his head, right? Everything with Tim is like this. It's just like, it's something that he kind of dreams up in his head, and the way he tweets it kind of sounds childlike, like the growing food for somebody to eat thing is, there's just something childish and like he did it in crayon before he tweeted it, sort of feel. But yeah, I don't know what he's trying to get at. There's a lot of these like very broad ideas. Of anybody who's not a right winger, there's these broad kind of, weird generic things that they come up with that it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I don't know if you have a way of deciphering what he's trying to say.
I could see how both sides of an argument could straw man the other side, right? Which is obviously
flatten the beanie. Is that what
right? Yeah. which I see that he's doing it, but it's just like, if there's such an obvious counter, then your flattening seems extremely remedial. So the whole point. Let me see. So he says, yeah, the fact that other people won't give me stuff they labor to proves I'm oppressed. So that's the exact basic what Marxism is, which is that I labor to produce something and a capitalist takes it away from me. That's the exact, isn't that like part of the exact basis of what some of the issues with capitalism? Yeah, that there's an owner class that takes away the things that we're making, and then we're ultimately alienated from that, because we don't get to, like, back even in like feudal societies, we got to get a little bit more of what we made, right? Or get some part of it, and now we're alienated from it. So
yeah, or like Marx's point would be,
yeah, correct me.
No.
Yeah. I'm serious.
No, I'm yes and
okay.
Marx's point would be, under feudalism, it's right out there in the open that, like, right. You have to, depending on the version of feudalism you have in your country, either you get to work a certain number of weeks a year on your own little plot, and then you have to spend the other weeks working the Lord's plot, or like maybe you're just working the one plot, but like then when the Lord's men come by, you have to give them a certain percentage of the crops, or else they like stab you. Right? That's feudalism. It's like really blatant.
Mm-hmm. And what I was saying too is that, but you do keep some of your own crop at the end of the day, right? Which is like, you make which I don't know if I'm in on all this stuff, but like, there's some subsistence element to it, unlike now, which is everything you make, or almost like, right, if you work in a factory, let's say.
So like if you read Capital, what Marx says is that in every class society, there's a portion of what the immediate producers, the peasants, the slaves, the proletarians make that they get back in one form or another. Mm-hmm. Even a slave, there's like a certain amount of what they produce that they sort of like goes into their like food and upkeep, for the slave owner. And certainly in feudalism, it's just like very obvious, like feudalism, it says right there on the tin what's inside. But capitalism, it's subtler, because you have this nominally free contract, between the worker and the capitalist, that they're legal equals who are just making this contract. But it says, okay, but getting real about this, you work, you work or you don't eat, or like whatever, like you have no good options, typically, besides signing a capitalist employment contract. So essentially, you're forced by the dull. I'm forgetting the phrase, but it's like yes, Jordan, who is in the capital class, says, points out Marx uses the phrase doubly free, which means that you're both legally free to sign a contract with any capitalist who will have you, but you're also free from any other means of supporting yourself besides doing that. So that's Marx's way of saying
is it dull compulsion of the marketplace rather than through capitalism is reproduced through dull compulsion of the marketplace. Is that the quote?
Yeah, I think that's it. The
Okay.
dull compulsion. Yeah, it's like there's just this dull compulsion of like economic necessity.
Mute compulsion. Yeah, I looked like I was reading, but I was really just I wasn't Googling. I was just accessing a different part of my memory.
Amazing.
Right? Yeah, I did come up with the word compulsion.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
But yeah, that's so. So you're.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly right on that first tweet. It's like no, literally, the sort of core of the, Marx's point, right, is that the labor is not in control of the product of their labor. That they that like some of the stuff that they labor to produce, the capitalist gets, and like look, Marx will say in a socialist society, you read Critique of the Gotha program, or there are even a couple places in Capital says this. Look, in every society, you're not going to get back 100% of what you produce because some of what's produced needs to go into fixing old machines and building new ones and common needs like schools and hospitals and upkeep for people who can't work. But like under socialism, we could all vote about that. And whereas in class societies, whether it's feudalism or capitalism or whatever, the ruling class just takes, part of the product of your labor just as an exercise of class power.
He's also, wouldn't you say that he's looking at this in a way that kind of disregards how the modern economy works?
Yes.
In general, a financialized economy, where he's talking about like, oh, this person grew food and then that other person took it, equals communism bad. Where what you're talking about is ownership of the means of production and all that stuff. Today, that's largely financialized assets, right? It doesn't map onto this really simplified. I think even right-wingers who watch his stuff, don't, unless they're younger or something, they would look at this and not recognize this in the modern economy, right?
To RM's point, like, look, in the realistic modern economy, what percentage of people are agricultural workers?
Right.
Not very much, right?
No.
The vast majority of us are eating food that other people grew. And even if you are an agricultural worker, most of the food you're eating somebody else grew, because it's a complicated, interconnected economic machine. Like the free, I guess, is the part that he's objected to, that that like you're not paying. But then again, going back to the first tweet, the question is, okay, paid who though? Right? Like I don't,
right.
Like when I go to the supermarket to buy food, that's not a transaction between me and the extremely underpaid guy in the field.
There's not even an option. There's not even like a jar that's like, Ricky actually grew this corn. If you want to leave him some money, it's not even like DoorDash or something like that. I have no way to get money to them.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you donate to their union.
Well, okay.
No, you can maybe give it to the UFCW, but like that's not a. But like at the store, there's no option to like. Oh, I'd also like it's like even at the cash register that like
go to the farmer's market. You still can't do that.
Would you like to round up to pay for this charity that we use as tax write off?
Yeah,
no option for like round up for Ricky.
Yeah. The move is being made is that if something is bought, it's legitimate, right? That's the move that's being made, as opposed to being given by the government. So there's kind of this implicit acceptance that the system we have denotes some kind of proper chain of title or something, which is that like bought is earned, right? And it's not based on inequity, that if you have the money, you deserve it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the key point, is exactly that last thing you just said, that like just the background assumption is that like everybody has the money that they should have. Like if you don't accept that, none of the rest of this follows. Like that it's like that you just assume that the existing distribution of resources is what it should be. And so given that distribution, so yeah, you have if you want, the only way it would be legitimate for you to have something is if you have enough to just buy it, because otherwise that would suggest that the existing distribution is bad. But before we move on to scarcity is fake, I do want to linger a little bit on this second tweet, because okay, no, we're just talking about rich people. Okay, first of all, no. I don't know. As you said, this is a character that Tim made up in his head to argue with. You know, like I guess at least when Plato was doing it, you know, he did it more artfully than Tim is. But all the real socialists that I know will say, to use his example about healthcare, yeah, of course, right? You know, like you're not people's taxes, you know, not just very rich people's, whatever. I mean, it's like there's just like middle class people's taxes would go up if we had universal health care. But the follow-up point they will always make is that you know, if you're like a, you know, even pretty privileged middle class taxpayer, the taxes that you paid before we institute Medicare for all, plus the insurance premium that you were paying, is still going to be more money than the increased taxes that you're paying for Medicare for all, right? So you know, so it's still more money in your pocket. It's just that like more of it is going, you know, more of it is going through, you know, is being like directed via the public sector, you know, and less of it is being directed via the private sector, which is what Tim is really objecting to. But also, like in this tweet, he is doing just the dumbest, like bargain basement libertarian argument. Like I've argued with a lot of libertarians, and you know, there's a spectrum, right? This is like the dumbest kind of Reddit level libertarian argument against Medicare for all. It's like, oh, you're forcing doctors to help you. It's like, no, you're fucking not. Like, are you forcing, like, you know, like if like, look, I mean, right wingers all love cops. I mean, are you forcing a policeman to protect you? I mean, if you say people have a right to police protection, does that mean that you're forcing? Like, you're not making anybody be a cop. You're just saying that the public will pay their salary. You know, you're not making, like, if you have a 100%, not even just Medicare for all, like, let's go further than that. Let's go to the maximum. Just have an American NHS. And not like the NHS after decades of neoliberal chipping away at it, but like the original NHS, like the Clement Attlee 1940s NHS, right? Every single thing that looks anything like a hospital has been nationalized. Okay. Well, you're not, it's not like you're standing behind the doctor, like the, you know, commissar at the Battle of Stalingrad with the, you know, the gun to their back, you know, being like, you know, perform that surgery faster. Like that's, you're like, nobody's being forced to be a doctor. It's just that, you know, if you are a doctor, you're working for the public sector, right? That's not forcing anybody to do anything. It's just like it's such a idiotic misunderstanding, like deliberate misunderstanding of what people are talking about. Because it's like, I'm not saying, when I say people have a right to healthcare, like people will do this like weird sort of like superficially logic choppy thing where they're like, oh, well, if A has a right to something, then you're saying that B must provide it. It's like,
yeah. Well, Rand Paul was always making that argument. Like he's a medical doctor.
Yeah. He said that doctors are slaves if we have a right to healthcare.
What if
like, are public school teachers slaves?
Well, they might say, yeah, but so to your, what if you said to them, you know, like, I mean, this is, I guess, where cops are the ones that enforce private property, right? Because libertarians think that private property is like maybe the only right that we have, right? Which is that if you buy a property, no one can like just walk onto it, is like what they think should be the only legally enforced right. So do they think the right to private property is enslaving they don't think it's enslaving the cop to go defend it?
Yeah, it's enslaving the grass.
Yeah, no, because it seems like a very obvious fallacy, right? Which is that if you have any rights at all, then
somebody has to enforce them. Yeah. Well, so this is the Matt Brunig point, that you like there's nothing that's more coercive about redistribution than there is about just enforcing existing distribution. Either way, you're using force to exclude some people from scarce resources. You know, we're not arguing about, you know, force. We're arguing about which system should be enforced. Like it's the coercion thing is a total red herring. And in this case, again, the issue is, like, if you want to make a coercion argument about Medicare for all, it'd be about making people pay taxes to pay for it. I mean, that'd be the real coercion argument. I wouldn't find that compelling because then again, I think the Matt Brunig point goes to that, right? It's like, well, look, whether you're enforcing that money being in somebody's bank account versus you're enforcing it, like being in the IRS's, right? Either way, it's force. We're just arguing about which one to enforce. But like when you say people have a right to health care, obviously what you mean by that is that society should pick up the tab for everybody's health care, that it shouldn't be in the market, that it should be something that's provided as a universal public good and is supported by taxation and all that stuff, right? That's what right to healthcare means. It doesn't mean like, we're going to draft people to be doctors, frog march them to the gates of the medical school and, lock the doors after, you're not being enslaved if you can only do, like if you want to do a certain job. That's you're saying like some services are prohibited, right? Which like, yeah, I mean, you can't sell people fentanyl, that they have like there are all kinds of businesses you can't have without a certain license, to be in that occupation. And sure, if we've decided that something should be provided exclusively by the public sector, if you want to do that particular job, you have to do it in there. But also you're allowed to quit. Like if you're an NHS doctor in the UK, you're allowed to quit. It's like the bobbies won't come to your house and and arrest you because you quit your job. Like they'll just maybe people will be like, oh, are you sure? Because you're still being paid pretty well. Are you sure you want to? But like that'll be the punishment, that you'll lose your doctor's salary. Like you do something else for a living. That's not what slavery means. So Tim ends his little cascade of thoughts here with, then when called out, they retreat to fantasy arguments. Scarcity is fake. Do they though?
I think he's retreating to a fantasy argument.
I mean, I think he's kind of retreating to a fantasy interlocutor.
Yeah, well, I don't.
Okay, if we were to steel man this,
yeah,
we could say like that.
Hey, this is Tim Pool we're talking about. We need to Iron Man it.
Okay, we need to Iron Beanie this one, which is that we're in. I mean, I guess it's kind of true, right? Ben, you correct me as the expert if I'm wrong, but we're in a stage of capitalist development where we do have that excess production is going, right? Like we're in the stage where we should be in terms of Marxist theory, we're in that stage where we should be transitioning to dealing with the distribution, right? So like, I guess he could be referencing that, but I don't know how it connects to the rest of what he's talking about.
So, I mean, if he's talking about people who literally don't think that's true, who think that like, there's literally an infinity of everything that anybody wants, then man, I agree. That's a dumb position that this hypothetical person has. But I guess maybe he's just hearing people say that realistically in the 21st century and an incredibly advanced and prosperous economy like we have now, resources are not so scarce that we can't give everybody food and healthcare, which are the two examples they talked about earlier. Yeah. In which case the people he's talking to are correct, right? Yeah. If you think there's so much scarcity that we can't do those things, then well, that is fake.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the point I was trying to grope at, is that like it kind of disproves what he's trying to say, right? Like, yeah, he does that a lot too, by the way. Like he'll say something and then like immediately contradict it, and like that's sort of the challenge of Tim Pool, is like taking him seriously, because it all kind of doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. So just to maybe continue the sort of futile exercise to make it like just 30 seconds longer, I will just say this takes us back to this actually takes us back to G.A. Cohen, because it's like, look, if you think if you literally think that resources are unlimited, which again I don't know who thinks that, but if you literally think that, then questions about distributive justice, what's, like what share of resources everybody should have are moot. You don't need to worry about them, right? Because it's like, look, if there's just more than enough for everybody of everything, then who cares? Who has a better claim on what? It's a non-issue. But look, I don't think it's a non-issue, right? Cohen certainly didn't think it was a non-issue. I mean, that's why he spent all this time thinking about, what's a good principle of distributive justice, that you shouldn't have any inequalities that are linked to, factors outside of your control, which is actually, one of the more radical possible views that you could have about this. But even that only makes sense given the assumption that that resources do actually have limits, that that you have to ask these questions. Like, okay, well, if there isn't just such an unlimited bounty that we just don't need to worry about these questions about who gets what, then who should get what? How do we decide? What's an acceptable inequality? What's an unacceptable inequality? And I don't know. I mean, I think Cohen's answer is reasonable. I think if you want to be more of a of a Rawlsian and say, well, inequalities are okay as long as they benefit the people at the bottom or something, we could have that discussion. But I guess it seems to me that Tim in this thread is just kind of looking out at the kind of inequality that we have in like late capitalism in 2023 and being like, yeah, this is fine. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.